Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and very good day to everyone. And today we will meet again on our online lecture on the subject of corporate communications. And today we'll talk about crisis communication on chapter 11. So this chapter will look into how we are actually an organization preparing and planning for crisis and also identifying the appropriate crisis communication strategies. In preparing for the crisis, there are five levels of contingency plans where in stage one, an organization minimal planning around a few contingency plans draw up for an emergency response. So at this stage, an organization actually form a group in the organization, it meant to cater for internal crisis within the organization. So that is the reasons why minimal planning around a few contingency plans drawn up for an emergency response. So, uh, for example, like ERT in the organization, emergency response team, or any ad hoc committee to uh, counter any internal issues or internal crisis within the organization. In the stage two, they have more, an organization will have more extensive planning but limited to natural disasters and potential human errors. So this is more or less like we have a committee, in safety and health within the organization. For example, we look into the safety of the machines, working safety. We look into the environmental factors, for example, usage of the chemicals within the organization, how we dispose the toxic or chemicals, and then how actually our operation is comply with the environmental issues or laws. Yeah, it's about like ISO 14000. So they have more what we call that planning. Yeah, since they are actually involved with for example, environmental issues as well as the human, what we call that, safety and health. And in the stage three, where extensive contingency plans with crisis procedure for probable natural disasters and human errors, as well as training of personnel so that employees can implement this crisis procedure. So in stage three, uh, this is an extended version or extended actions of stage two, and it supported together with the training of personnel so that employees can implement this crisis procedure. So they come up with a proper training program. While in stage four, similar to stage three, but involve an organization-wide consultations of potential crises and their impact on stakeholders. So normally at this stage, they start hiring a consultant or an external expert to give an advice or to plan a strategy if a crisis involve a stakeholder or giving an impact to the stakeholders. And in the stage five, finally, it will involve all of the previous stages, but also incorporates in environmental scanning and early warning system to identify crises as early as possible. So in preparing for crisis, we have to look into this five level of contingency plan. Next, look at the crisis type matrix, where if you look at this uh, table, yeah, in this table, there is an external and internal factor, a contributor to the crisis, and the crisis may unintentionally plan, or it is something where out of the what we call that mind of the organization, and that is an intentional kind of act that lead to the crisis. For example, the first quadrant, when we look at the fog pass, yeah, which is it contributed by the external party, and actually it is unintentionally caused a crisis to the organization. For example, in NGO, yeah, when they are talking about the environmental factors, they're talking about the proper way of disposing toxics or chemicals from the organization. So when NGO is promoting those environmental issues, for example, and then unintentionally they create a crisis within the organizations because that organization is either producing the chemical or they are using massively chemical in their productions, but they are not handling it properly. So it causes a pollution to the environment, and it's unintentionally invited a crisis within an organization. Where in the second quadrant, for example, here, terrorism is about intentional and external. Terrorism we can consider as an external party actually attacking, intentionally attack the organization, and they are actually would like to maybe uh, compete or beat the organization, and they more or less would like to project a bad image and negative image of the organization. This is with the intention, yeah. So they more or less like open up the secrets maybe, or the backside of the organization with the intention to make the organization collapse. While an internal, the next quadrant, which is accident, which is it is happen internal, the contributor is internal and unintentional. This is normally like a within the organization system, yeah, internal, and definitely if the contributors is internal and they have unintentional what we call that motives here, so we called it as an accident. While transgressions is also internal contributor, but they are intentional. Transgressions is about like the organization knows that for example, in their productions, they are not allowed to use certain chemicals, but because of they want to have a cheap productions, they still use that. Intentionally they are actually breaking the law, and they are actually doing an offenses, yeah, and in the productions. But as as long as it is not known by the government, for example law enforcer, then they still safe. But when they are actually caught by the enforcer or any legal department, and telling that they are actually committing with the unlawful act in the organizations, then actually they have an intention to do so, and it is from internal contributors as well. So in crisis communication strategies, there are many types of crisis communication strategies. First, strategies is non-existence. Non-existence strategy uh, actually where you claim of denying the crisis. So in the non-existence strategy, the first strategy is denial. At this in this act, it is you are giving a simple statement denying that a crisis exists, or the crisis is not exist at all. While in the second strategy in non-existent strategies is clarifications, where the organization actually taking an extensions of denial tactic with attempt to explain why there is no crisis. And in the third strategies is about attack and intimidation. And this tactic is about confronting the persons or group who claims that a crisis exists, may include a threat to use force or a lawsuit against the accuser. And the second strategy is about distance. In distance strategies where organizations claim of distancing the organization from direct responsibility for the crisis. So in these strategies, first is about giving an excuse. This is a tactic of denying intentions of violations by scapegoating others for the crisis. So this is more or less like using other reasons for that, for the crisis happen, for the crisis to happen, and they just want to be excused, and giving other reasons, and they escape by not admitting that it is because of them, but it is because of others. And the second strategy in distance strategy is downplay. Downplay is a tactic of convincing stakeholders or the general public that the situation is not that bad in itself or compared to other crises. This is about like you just play around with the severity of the crisis, and you try to hide the original state of the crisis. So you try to hide and you try to play safe and tell, and then actually told the public that you try to explain to the public that it is not that dangerous, it's not that harmful, and just a little in accident happened. Next is about association strategies. In association strategies is where you claim of connecting the organization to things positively valued by stakeholders and publics. The first strategy here is about bolstering. Bolstering is about reminding stakeholders and the general public of existing positive aspects of the organization, where you reminders of past charitable donations or a history of fair worker treatment in order to offset the negatives the crisis bring to the organization. Yeah, you just try to remind all kindness that you had done to the country, to the society, community, and then and saying that it is just a little damage that caused by you, and as compared to what kind of kindness that you have done. So you hope that they were able to forget about it, and they give an excuse to you. And the second kind of association strategy is about transcendence. In this kind of strategy, where the organization associate the negative and loss arising from a crisis with a desirable higher order goal. For example, animal testing to develop life-saving drugs. Yeah, we know that, for example, we have heard about methane drugs, which is used by the drug addicts to reduce the what we call the bad effect of the real drugs. Yeah, to and then by using these, they are able to reduce the usage of the true drugs, and slowly they are able to get rid of the drugs. Uh, Next, under the association strategies, is about suffering strategy, where in this strategy you claim that the organization suffers from the crisis. And under this suffering strategy, there is a victimization strategy. In this strategy, organization use a tactic of portraying the organization as a victim of the crisis in order to win public sympathy. And this kind of strategy commonly used by certain organizations, saying that you are also affected and you are also a victim due to the economic slowdown, and that is the reasons why you have to up or mark up a little bit the price in order to safeguard of your business. So which is in association, one of the association strategy. Next strategy is about acceptance and accommodations. Under the acceptance strategy and accommodation strategy, it is where uh, you actually giving high perceptions of high level of responsibility. You give the mindset to the people to perceive that you are having high level of responsibility. So In this situation, we have like acceptance strategy and and accommodation strategy. So under acceptance strategy, where you are or the organization claim accepting responsibility or culpability of the crisis. Under the acceptance strategy, there is full apology, where the organization simply apologizing for the crisis and accepting the blame. And the second one is about remediations, where the organizations announcing some form of compensation or help to victims, either in terms of money, good, aid, and etc. And the third strategy and the acceptance strategy is about repentance, where the organization asking for forgiveness. The organization apologizes for the crisis and asks stakeholders and the general public to forgive its misdeeds. Again, under the acceptance and accommodation, under the accommodation strategy, where you claim promising to prevent the crisis from recurring again. And under this accommodation strategy, there is one rectification strategy, where you will take corrective action to prevent a recurrence of the crisis. You will show them your corrective action plan, and you may want to show that you hire someone or consultant to help you in doing your corrective action, to convince people, to convince the public that you are very serious in what we call taking a corrective action. In communicating about crisis, yeah, we talk about natural accident. When we talk about the accident, it is internal contributor and also unintentional. So unintentional and outwit the control of organization and can be easily responded to with a distancing strategy. While transgressions, we look at the previous one, uh, it is intentional action taken by organization, and acceptance strategy may be utilized in order to calm down the public and for them to understand your situation. While under the terrorist attacks, yeah, it is directed at the organization by external agents, and often there is very little direct organizational responsibility or culpability. So, an organization may adopt a suffering strategy which portrays the organization as an unfair or some malicious outside actor. As for the crisis planning, you will have to develop communication plan. It is meant for probable crisis scenarios and also to establish key responsibilities for communication professionals and also to identify the organization's key spokespersons. And under the crisis planning, we also have media training, where the CEO, executive directors, and key spokesperson will be trained with the media and how to handle the media, for example, while they are interviewed during press release or press conference. So it is very good to have a crisis planning, as and when the crisis happen, you are ever ready to face that situation. Crisis communication team also important to be formed, or uh, you have to set in the organization. As for especially in a major crisis, to handle the press office will handle field media inquiries and manage information, and uh, safe crisis location where the media can meet and be brief in the event of hazardous situation. This is where like a journalist or a newspaper people or media come to the place where the the situation happened, and so a person who are at the location have to be well trained in handling these people, because they are very complicated, very complex, and sometimes really having a big trick in asking the questions or in interrogating you. Then identify contacts at relevant external agencies who may need to be contacted when you are in a crisis, especially, for example, like the consultants or crisis management teams, and maybe third party which can help you in handling the situation as well as in handling the media on how to actually what we call that entertain or answer all the questions coming from them. So I think this is about the crisis communications, although it is very brave, but I hope that you get all the info about the crisis communication, and you can use this in your organization. With that, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Thank you and bye bye.